Hey guys, Brian Bledsoe once again with your September update here for Red Summit Rangeland Insurance. And not a whole lot of new stuff to talk about in this update, but still some things to go over, which I think you'll find important. This video probably won't take all that long given the way we're stacked as far as the overall pattern is concerned, but I still want to give you a good deal of information going forward. I know it's coming up with PRF season, and we obviously know that that is a very important time of year. A lot of folks want that data, and that's exactly what we're going to give to you right now. We'll start out with the La Nina situation, current sea surface temperature anomalies. You can see them right here, the blue shading here across the central Pacific Ocean, extending really just northeast of Australia all the way over here off the west coast of South America. This hasn't changed a whole lot, nor do I see it changing a whole lot as we head through the course of this upcoming fall season, and really, for that matter, for quite some time. In fact, the latest multi-model ensemble probabilities for La Nina. This is the early September update, just came out a couple of days ago. All those blue bars indicate very probable La Nina scenarios here until they get down to about January, February, March, where we drop down to about 55%, which at this range is still pretty significant. So we at least have to acknowledge that. And that kind of goes along with the line of thinking that I've been having, that the winter would probably be controlled mostly by La Nina. And then as we exit the winter and headed into spring, that's when it eventually would kind of shut off and we kind of go back toward neutral territory. And that's kind of what this graphic is showing you right there. The one thing that I will say is that it's not just about La Nina. We obviously want that to go away, but the overall state of the Pacific is cold, reminiscent of what we saw back in the 50s right now. So we need the Pacific and its overall state to warm up a bit in order for us to finally put this La Nina to bed and turn the page a little bit to where we can get something that's possibly a little bit more favorable for certain areas of the country when it comes to moisture, instead of just talking about drought, fire danger, and the likes of that kind of thing. So fingers crossed we can get both of those accomplished, but this is something that is going to take a little while to change, and I don't see it changing at least in the near term per that graphic that I showed you right there. Let's look down the road and show you what's going to be happening in terms of our potential analogs. Okay, all of those years that I have shown right there are potential analog years, simply because the Pacific Decadal Oscillation was negative during those years. We had La Ninas in play during those years, and you can see the areas that favor drier than average conditions for October through December. That includes Texas, a large part of the Mississippi Valley, and the eastern seaboard. A little narrow area of Northern California is in there as well, but I would anticipate, if nothing else, the storm track to get a little bit more active for the Pacific Northwest and maybe Northern California a little bit more quickly than what this particular set of analogs would suggest. But it's something I'm going to be watching, and it's something that some of our computer models are hinting at too. This is what the Climate Prediction Center is pinpointing for the next 3 months. You can see the bullseye of drier than average conditions right there over the southern tier of the country. Pacific Northwest, parts of the Northern Rockies in the green, getting a little bit more active, but it still has some of that brown shading right there across the northern 2/3 of California, indicating the chances of maybe some slightly drier than average conditions during that time. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out, because our NMME model is kind of hinting at the same thing. It's got the core of the driest areas farther east across Texas, Oklahoma, eastern Colorado, Kansas, and points into the Mississippi and Ohio Valley. Up into British Columbia starting to get active. That's an indication of that La Nina storm track that sets up. So when we flip the script to November, you see the Pacific Northwest has more of that to work with. Farther south, Southern California, and points east, obviously drier than average. That's very typical for a La Nina. If we look at December, well, that moisture source broadens out a little bit. Pacific Northwest, Northern Rockies, parts of the Northern Plains, and then that dry signal kind of relaxes a little bit the farther south and southwest you go. Again, very typical La Nina that rolls right into January. And why might you say, well, why is it to have this precipitation configuration the reminiscent, resembles La Nina? Well, because the model thinks that there's a La Nina there. It knows there's a La Nina there. So it's going to paint a precipitation forecast very similar to what it would expect during a La Nina. Wetter north, drier south. Again, that's January looked at. Here's February, pretty much the same story. And again, for California, that would obviously be significant if we missed out on those 2 core months of the wet season right there, because I don't think we really pull out of that until we head toward March. Could we have some miracle moisture in March again? Possible, but again, wetter north, drier south. That's kind of where we go. And then the signal kind of disappears somewhat once we get into April. Not entirely, but Again, this is way out there and things are subject to change. But if the La Nina was done and out of here, then obviously we might see some favorable conditions during there with some better moisture prospects. This is a Euro seasonal model. You can see very similar to what I showed you with the MME model, where the brown area is showing up as drier than average right there across a large part of the country, especially the west and the central portion of the United States. If we look at November, again, maybe we get a little burst right there in California, but areas farther east, drier than average, very typical with a La Nina setup. But it doesn't necessarily continue for everybody. If we look at December here, we have some moisture lining up the Sierras, but bottom line, the better storm track is up there in the Pacific Northwest across Oregon, Washington, Northwest Rockies up there in eastern, or I should say western Montana, and into Idaho. Areas farther east, eastern New Mexico, Texas, and across the eastern part of the country, drier than average into December. But then into January, you can see some drier than average stuff returning to California and across the southwest part of the country. Wetter north, drier south until you get to the Mississippi and Ohio Valley. February is doing the same thing. Southern tier of California, drier than average. The northern tier up in the Pacific Northwest, wetter than average. So that's something that is going to take a little bit of work here over the next month or two to try to see these models and the analogs iron these details out that are very important. The one thing that I am encouraged about as far as the models go, at least this one, Northern California keeps that moisture in there into March. Again, it's typical La Nina. Not every La Nina is the same, but that's the way the model is trending, at least for the time being. Another version of these models is the IRI multi-model Ensemble. And this is the forecast for October, November, December. You can see where the most stout dry signal is. It's over the southern tier of the country, California in the white, a little bit of green eastern part of the state. But again, no tip towards severely drier than average with this model during that time. And that would certainly be a big win. If we look at December, January, and February, well, then that kind of comes back to the southern tier of California. Not gangbusters. The core of that dry signal runs across Mexico, New Mexico, West Texas, and over the southeast part of the country. So if nothing else, there are a few encouraging signs right there. But again, I just would caution you, the farther north you live, the better your prospects are going to be of having moisture. The farther south you are, the worse prospects you're going to have while this particular weather pattern is locked in. And by particular weather pattern, I mean a pretty stout La Nina. So that's really all I have for you this month. We're obviously going to be doing the webinar coming up September 21st, I believe. So if I have any new information there to share with you, I'll obviously plug that in. Otherwise, the newest stuff is going to come in early next month. We'll see you then if I don't see you before. Take care.